Hello and welcome to the Drex Files. Oh my God, this is not the Drex Files book club. This is the Second Life book club. I apologize. See, this happens when you do 5 shows per day. Hello there and welcome to the Second Life book club. My name is Draxtor Dupre. I just rebranded everything by myself. We meet here every Wednesday to discuss writing and reading, and we do this most often with exciting guests, just like today. Sometimes they're superstars of the book world, up and coming folks, and hopefully soon a special panel with published authors who are also SL residents. So that's something I'm working on. Maureen B in the local chat says, "What an ego!" Yes, Maureen, you're absolutely right. I'll introduce today's panel. They're on the stage with me here in just a moment after a few house cleaning notes. You have noticed a new time. I've got a lot of feedback. People generally like that we start at 12 o'clock Pacific or SLT. Some have said they prefer the 10 o'clock, but we do have a small team and we switch to the 12 o'clock time. If you have other show ideas that you would like to have at a different time, please always feel free to email me or message me in World. We're streaming to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, so I also welcome all our disembodied audience members on these 2D platforms. I will incorporate the comments from them as well. We have, I believe, almost a full house. Book Club Island is always open, and if you find a well-meaning noob stumbling about, and if you're a seasoned Second Life or help them out, recommend some books, befriend them, be nice, be patient, join the group, suggest a show idea, send me an IM or email. I also put out a reading list every time after the show on bookshop.org. Bookshop.org is a great sort of anti-Amazon entity. They give away a lot of their profits to local outlets that are hurting, not only now COVID. And you can find the reading list of past shows at bookshop.org/shop/Draxtor. Now, I would like to thank our team. Strawberry Linden is helping with camera. He's in fact running the camera and the streaming. Brett Linden is the chief of security and marketing. Patch Linden, the whole governance team. Big shout out to Squeaky Mole today, who solved already 5 problems within 5 minutes, 1 problem per minute. Big thanks to Marianne McCann, who customized the venue. Kralos, who customizes the avatars. Silas Merlin does avatar work. AJ McDowell makes coffee cups. There's a coffee cup on the table here. If you're in World with us, you can grab this coffee cup and attach it and have some coffee. So much for house cleaning. Let me introduce today's guests on the topic. As you can see behind me, the topic is writing for books for children, from preschool to YA. Now, what does YA stand for? It stands for young adult. And on the stage with me right now is Barbara Mojica, aka Little Miss History. Hello, Barbara.
Hi, everyone.
And if you look behind you, you are synonymous with your character, visually speaking. And I just brought you up here. Here you're with guns a-blazing. You have embodied your character now.
Yes, I do.
And we'll talk a little bit about what Little Miss History does. And next to Little Miss History is Nadine Kaadan. And please correct me if I mispronounce your name. Nadine, how are you?
No, it's correct. Hi, how are you? I'm very good.
Awesome. And Nadine is coming to us from, I think you live in Paris, but you're originally from Syria. And I'm bringing up a bunch of your characters here in the back. Look at them.
I live in London. Thanks.
This is actually from your book, The Jasmine Sneeze. This is a cat that has issues with Jasmine. Nadine has written many and illustrated many Arabic language books, and it's my understanding that only 2, unfortunately, have been translated as of yet, right? Or do you have more?
2 that I wrote in English, so it wasn't a translation. Since I moved to London, I started to write in English, and I have a 3rd one coming up in November, so 3.
I want to talk a little bit about that writing in different languages and the issue if you write in a language that then is not being translated and the issue of exposure of that. Um, so welcome to Second Life. Now, on the other side of the couch is Margi Preus. Margi Preus is has a special shelf here at the Drax house. I'm going to bring in one book, Heart of a Samurai. Margi, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So this, I just brought in my favorite book of yours, Heart of a Samurai. My son was practically raised on your books. It's a historical. Is this historical YA or what's the genre?
It's historical fiction for middle grade and or YA. So it kind of crosses from middle grade to YA.
You know what I noticed? I know you also write middle grade, but what I noticed about preparing the show today, I noticed that almost all your heroes are 14 years old. I mean, the YA stuff. Is that intentional?
Well, no, not exactly. I think it's that age is when kids really start to they start to grow up. They start to see the broader world and broader picture, and their lives really start to change. So it's a very momentous time of life, I think.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that and what the momentous change in my son's life was when he read your book and then all of a sudden became very mature because this book is about a shadow on the mountain. I know I keep going on about this book because I love it so much, but this is about a spy that works against the Nazis that occupy Norway. Next to you is Carol P. Roman. Hello, Carol. Can you hear us?
I sure can. Thank you for having me here.
Now, please let us know in the audience if Carol is a little bit, if her audio is okay, or if it's faint, or if you have a problem, because Carol is very sophisticated. She has her own avatar runners. It's unbelievable the technology that we put out for this show. I mean, we really spare no expense. Carol came with her own avatar puppeteer, who may or may not be on a different continent. Carol is the author of over 50 books, a bunch of different series, and I got a nice box from you, Carol, sent from New York to Germany. You have a series called "If You Were Me," and that explains other cultures to kids in the present and in the past. We'll talk about that. But most importantly, and now please watch this space and watch your head. Maybe cover your head with your arms because something is going to fall down from above. And this is my favorite book of yours. Here it goes. Uh-oh, it's stuck. It's still falling. Is it coming down?
Oh my
Yes.
Down.
Yeah.
This book is called Silly Jokes for Kids. It has 800 jokes, and this is the book I devoured when it came in. And I don't understand, Carol, why it's not called silly dad jokes or jokes that are perfect for dads who want to be silly. Now, welcome everybody to the Second Life Book Club. Let's start the round with Nadine, who is the only non-Anglo-American on this panel except for me, but I'm not on the panel, I'm the moderator. Nadine, what makes a good book for kids? Or what makes a book good for kids? And I know that your books tackle tough subject matters. I want to go specifically to the book Tomorrow, which, by the way, is here also on the table, so the in-world audience can cam around and look at these books and maybe grab them. Some of them are physical, but they all have the website embedded in it. So you can go to Nadine's website. One of your books is called Tomorrow, and that deals with a heavy subject. But take it where you will with this question. What makes a book good for kids? Nadine? Oops, I don't know if Nadine can hear us. Well, let's move it over then to Margi. What makes a book good for kids? And I know this is a very broad question because obviously middle grade is different from any other grade, but how do you approach this? I mean, I would imagine that you have to define the target group first, but what are some of the parameters that are substantially different from a book that you write for an adult?
Well, first of all, I really feel that for kids, the most important thing is that they enjoy reading. Because if they enjoy what they're reading, they're going to want to read more. And the more they read, the more different kinds of work they'll be exposed to, and the more different kinds of ideas and cultures and people and situations and everything else that you experience when you read. So I think anything that they enjoy is a good book. But then I have my own standards for my own writing.
So in other words, you're basically saying, and we spoke before on this topic many times actually. You're saying that if a kid finds a book good, it's not the role of the adult to say that, wait a minute, this is garbage. Here, read this instead.
Right. I don't think you should ever tell a kid that what they're reading and enjoying is not good, because obviously it's good for them and it's good as far as they're concerned. I think if kids want to have that conversation, that's great. I think it's good for kids to discuss among themselves what they think is good and why they think it's good, and try to convince each other that the book they're reading is the better book, and so on. But I feel like what adults should do is just continue to guide young readers to books that they think are good, while really letting them have free reign in choosing their own reading material.
Mm-hmm. So I'm the worst parent in the world.
Why do you rip books out of your children's hands?
Yes, and then I have them take them to the garbage as additional punishment. No, of course not. I agree with you 100%. Now, Nadine, let's try voice again. And we have obviously a limited bandwidth on the internet. I see this with some of my favorite podcasts. Some of them produced with quite a bit more technical resources that they have issues with bandwidth. Nadine, let's give it a try. Can you hear us? I cannot hear Nadine. It could be bandwidth. It could be all sorts of things. Let's keep trying. We won't give up. Barbara, how would you chime in? And Barbara, you have a history as a teacher, and that's actually also a question that I wrote down. But how would you respond to my wonderfully broad question of what is a good book for kids?
I think that a book should provoke a sense of curiosity and wonder in a child. It has to be something that they're interested in, first of all. And I think a good book makes them feel emotionally secure, makes them feel good. I think a good book also has enough challenging vocabulary so that the child will be able to expand their knowledge. The book shouldn't be overwhelmingly difficult, but it shouldn't be too easy either. And it should spark kind of a sense of imagination and play as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Carol, how about you?
Okay, you're muting me? Okay. Yeah, I echo what Barbara has just said, but the only thing I would add to it is any book that a kid reads should make them want to read more. So if the subject is screwdrivers and they read a book on screwdrivers and then they want to read a book about hammers, the book is successful because it's making them, well, I just finished, I read with my grandson, so, he's 11 years old. I've been reading with him. We do it over the internet, especially now because we're social distancing. And we just finished a book today. He was reading for school. I read it while he reads it, and then we discuss the book. And it helps him to stick with the book. And we finished the book, and when we completed it, it was a great book. And then I said to him, well, how do you feel? And he said, well, I think I want to read more. To me, that was a successful book and a successful author. He wanted the next book of the series. So that's what I think. If it opens a gateway to another book, that book is a success.
I just heard Nadine coughing. I think Nadine is back on voice. Nadine, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I have no idea what happened and why I couldn't
Fantastic.
hear anyone.
Oh, no worries. I mean, we have the bandwidth can be an issue these days. Everybody's online. Now, I love what you guys are saying, and I want to bring Nadine in on that same subject because Nadine is tackling these subject matters that are tough and that deal with real hardship of people in the world right now. The boy in tomorrow is in Syria, and he cannot go outside
Yes.
because he's too dangerous. It's too dangerous. He's quarantined, not for COVID reasons, but for other reasons since probably the beginning of his life. I mean, you can imagine. You don't put it that explicitly in the book, but you can imagine from how old he is. So, how do you put this in a tone that draws kids in, and even kids who are in that situation themselves? I mean, it's easy for me to present this to a kid here in Western Europe, but I saw an interview with you where you expressed that this book Tomorrow, which by the way is here on the table, also resonates with kids that are living in these war zones. Okay, we do have a bunch of voice problems today, but Nadine, if you can hear my question, you can also type it in the local chat, and then I can just read it. So feel free to type this in the local chat. And again, I'm bringing up some art from Nadine's book Tomorrow. This is Nadine?
Yeah. I think when I wrote the book, I was myself living in a war zone. I was myself in Syria, and I was watching children around me and how they feel, the uncertainties, how their life is changing. Parents not taking enough time to explain to them because themselves, everyone was confused, and I felt the need to reflect what's happening in the children's books for these kids. Now,
Okay, I think Nadine is dropping in and out, and you can also type this into local chat if you want. And while Nadine is doing that,
can you hear me?
yeah, it's just dropping in and out a little bit.
It? Hello?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's dropping in and out. We'll roll with the punches today, I suppose. Now,
okay.
If you could write this in the local chat, and then I'll read it, that'd be great. And you can speak at the same time, and we'll just see what happens. In the meantime,
I'm gonna start writing now. Okay.
Okay, we have some lag. I'm wondering to all of you guys, and take it where you will, about illustrations. I mean, Nadine is talking about illustrations. I brought it up here in the background, and Carol's books have a lot of illustrations. I'll throw some up in the background. And Margi's books have, with their historical backdrop, a lot of contextual information, also with visuals, which I find very interesting. Oftentimes in her books, it's the real life protagonists that take place. So what is the role of illustration in a kid's book? And again, you can specify this to the age group. Of course, it varies with the age group, but in all of you guys' works, their illustrations do play a role. I mean, obviously, with Little Miss History, she's also the vehicle that guides through these different stories. But what is the role of illustrations in the way you use them in your books? Anyone?
I
Um,
think
Let
I
me throw
think
it.
that
No, go ahead,
illustrations
Barbara. Yes.
capture a child's attention, first of all. They also help a child develop an appreciation for art forms as well as literature. And a lot of young children in particular aren't exposed too much to art. So the younger you can get a child involved in appreciating art in many forms, whether it be a photograph or a drawing, or even the type of illustration that goes along with a graphic novel, it helps to get them to focus on the topic that you're talking about. And it also opens them up to participate more interactively. So if a parent or a teacher is reading the book, the illustrations can also help develop a conversation about what is happening in the book.
Mhm. This is a really interesting point because I've heard it expressed from the elitist side of the aisle, where I sometimes hang out, where people say, "Well, you shouldn't be, you should. This detracts from kids learning how to read properly and all this kind of." I mean, that basically the same argument that is being used in comic books, but your point is well made about appreciating art and illustration as an art form. Yeah, Margie, you were chiming in, and then we'll go to Carol after that.
right. Well, of course, there's visual storytelling as well as verbal storytelling, and illustrations can do a lot of the storytelling themselves, especially in picture books. And I think illustrations serve a somewhat different um, function in picture books than in middle grade or YA, when there's usually fewer illustrations. And the books that you mentioned of mine that are based on real people, often I try to include photographs so that the reader can see this is a real person, this really happened to this person. And that's a kind of a different thing than in picture books, when illustrations are actually telling some of the story. And I think picture books are very fascinating that way, because the words and the pictures work together to tell the story. And it's almost like a reflection of what happens between reader and writer. So the writer tells part of the story, and the reader finishes the story in their own imagination.
Right.
And I'm very impressed with people who do their own illustrations, Barbara and Nadine. And I also wanted to say to Nadine that I'm just so impressed with your ability to write about these difficult topics while you yourself are experiencing
Thank you.
hardship.
Oh,
Thanks.
Nadine is back with voice. Wonderful. I'll read this real quick, and then what you wrote, and then we'll pray to the Lord of the
Right.
internet. So Nadine was typing here, was a hard topic to touch on, hard to touch on this difficult topic in a hopeful way for children. I brought the illustrations over to my left here on stage. You can still see them. And Nadine says children need to see their problems in a story, and I was surprised when I read the book for refugee children how the session turned into a therapy session. That's indeed interesting. Nadine, give me 1 second here to explain what's happening behind the screen. Here I brought up an illustration of one of Carol's books. This is a book that explains the ancient civilization of Mali, and this is in the series If I Lived in XYZ, then I would be this person. So this is a great example of illustrations like Margie said, taking part of the words um, and then serving sort of a complementary role. Big shout out before we forget, Barbara. Your husband Victor is actually illustrating the book, so this is a husband and wife team with Little Miss History.
Oh.
We want to bring in Carol, but Nadine, since you had a little outage, what do you mean by turning into a therapy session when you were talking about the presentation of tomorrow with those Syrian children?
Yeah, yeah. So basically, that was, oh my God, 8 years ago when the war started. And I took the book when I was first published. And I went to a refugee camp to read the story. And it was interesting because I had no experience. I didn't know what to expect. And these kids, they've been through really, really difficult time. And they've been through bombing and they escaped. And they were refugees in Lebanon. And after I read the story, all the children wanted to tell me their story because the story is about the experience of this little boy in Syria and how his life was changing. When I finished, they wanted to tell me their story, how they experienced the war, how they escaped the war, and what's happening to them. So it was a way to open the conversation. And I had no idea what to expect. I had no experience in this. And I realized that a story reading, a children's book, can be therapeutic, can be a way to open a conversation, can be a way to reflect on your own problems and see how the character is dealing with these difficult emotions, and you can relate to it. So since then, I really learned that children really need to see themselves in stories, and they need to relate on their problems in children's books.
Yeah, and there's obviously, I mean, we encounter this often. I mean, I do, when parents say this is not age appropriate, and it's a really strange dynamic, especially in sort of, I think this may be a little bit of a class issue, where people in some affluent neighborhoods and circles have expressed to me that certain things should be shielded from certain things like war, or how other children their same age are dealing with these things, and I find that actually quite ludicrous to look at the situation like that. I think especially people who are not in that situation, or kids, should be exposed to this, and with obviously with context, right? I'm not suggesting they should be watching CNN alone. Carol, how do you feel about exposing children to difficult subjects?
I'm unmuted. All of my books are deal with subjects from even going into the Pirate series. It talks about it. If You Were Me. Oddly enough, you showed If You Were Me and Linden. A lot of parents were really horrified because it just talks about slavery and the fact that this girl is 13 and going to be married. But it's not If You Were Me and lived in today's time. This book is a reflection of what your life would be like if you were 13 years old living in ancient Mali in the 1500s.
Yeah.
So I don't have any problem exposing children in a way, as long as you're there. First of all, you have to pre-read and understand whether your child can take a subject like this. That's number one. And number two, as long as you read it together in open discussion, I think that any subject is pretty much, you have to prepare your children for the world. And if we keep them in bubbles, they're not going to be prepared. It's how I raised my own sons. It's how I deal with my grandchildren. And I don't like to sugarcoat. I like to tell them the truth. I do edit. For instance, one book I wrote is called 1 to 10. And the book deals with coping with problems. And I put in, it's a rabbit and a squirrel discussing how do we rate our problems. Like he was getting all upset because he lost all his acorns, and the rabbit tells him, "Don't get upset. That's like really that's a 4 on a scale of 1 to 10." And they start going through problems. So one of the problems is losing your pet. What's that like? Or your parents split up. What's that like? Where would you put that? You know, what would you put it at that you got a bad mark at school? So I think that kids have to be exposed. Going back to the illustrations, I think illustrations set the tone. For a parent looking at a book will know from the illustrations whether a book is appropriate. It sets the tone for the child. It does, like my colleagues all said, it does help with the storytelling, but it does set the tone. And whether the child can grasp the concepts that that book is going to show. I think that kids should know what's going on in the world around them, and I think it's great that Nadine wrote this book. It makes me want to go buy it. I think it's a terrific. Kids have to know about these things. I think it's a terrific idea.
Carol, this is wonderful, and what's interesting, because actually I wanted to ask you about the Mali book and some of the ancient books. It's interesting that you had, as you said, a little bit of pushback. This book is obviously, and I love the way you set up the series. There's a current series of current culture. I'm throwing up the slide here in the background. This is current Germany. I found that very funny because you talk about that the German father will say, we have to pay with euro, and then Opa, the grandfather, will tell you that euro is not German money, it's a European currency that replaced the German marks that were used when he was a small boy. And that is so true. My father still talks, that generation of Germans still talk about the Deutschmark and everything. That's when everything went downhill when the euro came in. But so with the Mali book, and you divide this series into ancient cultures, and as you said, you had a pushback that some of the practices in the 13th century are outdated from today's point of view. Well, that is just crazy that that parents would even point that out. I think you did a tremendous job with these ancient cultures, because especially the Mali book to me shows how incredibly advanced they were on many levels. So
It was a fascinating book too. I knew nothing about ancient Mali when I picked that subject. Each book that I picked, I knew very little about the subjects, with the exception of Elizabethan England. I was pretty well versed in that. And I had so much fun researching it. Those books, you talked about the culture books, the current culture books, and the ancient history books. What I did for each one of them is I picked 10 subjects that I felt children or students would be interested in knowing. And it's currency, it's what you would call your parents, it's kind of where you would take a friend if they came to visit, where would you take them, like the icon of that city, and so, where you would go on vacation, what you would eat. Like food is a great equalizer, what kind of food. So then when I started doing the historical books, I used the same template, only it was a little for older children, so it was a little bit more detailed, but it would be, what did you wear, what kind of games did you play, and basically it puts a student in the shoes of a person living in that time period. But you can't teach history if you're not going to tell the truth, and if you're not going to say this is how it really was. How can we appreciate, for instance, as women, the freedom that we have if we don't know that we didn't have freedom a couple of hundred years ago, that we weren't allowed to own property? How can we know that we have to go and vote, that we can't throw away our freedoms because we worked so hard to get them? So the books all celebrate what was and what is. It's not to say this is good. It's not a judgment. It's a report of what life was like and how do we compare it with today, and maybe we should appreciate our lives a little bit more.
it's funny. Like I said, I didn't I read this as a celebration also of the contribution of an ancient culture that I didn't know anything about. If you're just tuning in, this is the Second Life Book Club. Happens every Wednesday here, 12 o'clock. My name is Draxtor Dupre. Today, writing books for children from preschool to YA. So this is a huge topic. I know it's people go like, Draxtor, why do you pick these huge topics and then you have an hour and you want to tackle everything? Well, this is also supposed to be I guess an appetizer for folks and a start of a deeper discussion. And I like to provide a variety of different opinions and different practitioners of the craft to come from different different aspects of this vast genre. I'm going to throw up a few slides here in the back. We haven't seen this one here from Nadine's illustrations are on the side here, but watch this space in the background because this is a little collection of Nadine's various art. It's very colorful, and the palette of the tomorrow is a little bit darker because of the subject matter, which is interesting. You picked a different palette for that. I'm just going to go through a few slides. Here is Margi's new book, which I haven't read yet, Village of Scoundrels. It plays in Nazi-occupied France, and folks in those French villages who help their Jewish friends and neighbors. They hide them, they help them to escape, and then also a collaboration with an illustrator by the name of Cheryl Pilgrim, The Littlest Voyageur. And we mentioned earlier Carol's contemporary cultural series, which she sent me a whole box of. If You Were Me and Lived in Greece, If You Were Me and Lived in Hungary, Kenya, Israel, Italy, India, there's Egypt, a whole bunch of other countries, and of course, and Barbara's latest book is Little Miss History Travels to Hyde Park, home of the Franklin D. Roosevelt Presidential Library. And now in the chat, I just saw Beth Ghostraven, who I believe is a librarian. She says, yes, pre-reading is essential. Now, what is pre-reading? I didn't know that pre-reading is a thing. Can you guys enlighten me?
Well, I imagine she means the librarians read the books before they are, so they're sort of vetted.
Mm-hmm. Here, Beth is typing. She says, yes, at a U.S. middle school. She is a librarian, and I guess that's what it is. So the librarian is the gatekeeper. Parents or teachers need to read a book that they're unsure of before they present it to their kids.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
I think Beth also said something in the chat about if kids read something in a book that they're not ready for, that they don't yet understand or can't digest, usually goes right over their heads. And I think that's very true. I taught children's literature for a while, and one of the books we looked at was The Giver, Lois Lowry, and a lot of my students had read it in 5th, 6th, 7th grade, and then again as sophomores or juniors in college. And most of them said, oh, I didn't get this, or I didn't get that, or I didn't get the other thing when they were in 5th or 6th grade. And it made for a really good discussion, because I think that adults, of course, are going to see layers or see possibilities of bad things happening in books that young readers just might not connect to. And if they're not ready for it, it'll just go over their heads.
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably the most crucial thing, and we talk about this almost on a weekly basis in some sort of fashion, that This can also turn off young kids from reading for their entire lives if they've been presented with a majority of material that is just that they can't connect to. I guess that goes back to the earlier point where we all agree um, that any type of reading is good reading in the beginning to just get connect reading with a positive feeling in general, or positive emotions, no matter what it is.
Well, and maybe we could also add then that what makes a good book is many layers, so that you can keep reading it at many different times of your life and find different things to experience.
Beth is saying, of course, you wouldn't give them something with gratuitous violence, but they're ready for lots more than we think they are. Readers come to a book with their current life experience, so they approach a book differently at different ages. Any reading is building fluency and strength. Now, this goes to a question that I had, and Margi's pointing to this too. How do you guys, and let's make the round, let's start with Barbara, aka Little Miss History. Earlier I was referring to Barbara, and people were like, who's Barbara? I don't see any Barbara here. Well, as we said, Barbara has become Little Miss History. Thank you, Silas Merlin. I think Silas is in the audience, and he made this avatar based on Victor, Barbara's husband, illustrations. Silas, thank you. This is an amazing job. Now, Barbara, Little Miss, how do you connect with readers? I mean, I imagine you book schools, or schools book you. You go to these schools. And what's the process like when you get invited to a school, or you sort of, secure a school gig? Is there some sort of vetting process? Is there some concern that you may not be, you know, as we're talking about it, you may expose children to something that they shouldn't be exposed to? Or what are some of the concerns, or how does that work, that process?
I've never had that problem. I've never gone into a school and been asked to modify or limit the selection of my books. Very often, if I go into a school for an all-day session, I will work with different grades, and I've read my books to kindergartners, and I've read my books to sixth graders and discussed them when they have different perspectives, uh, different levels of understanding. Uh, but I find that the book reaches them in different. Of course, I wouldn't approach it the same way with a kindergarten audience as I would with a sixth grade audience. But that's, again, it's all in a matter of the way you guide the discussion
Mm-hmm.
when you present the book. So it's not really important to read the book to them. The teacher very often has read the book or previewed the book with the class ahead of time, but it's getting them to interact and open up with what they think. Going back to what Carol said before, I think it's important that we don't impose our view of what's happening today on people who lived in the past and the events of the past, because they are not necessarily one and the same. That's why my character has a slogan: if you don't know your history, you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because in order to understand how we got to today, we have to have some knowledge of people and events of the past. And when people hear the word history, a lot of people say, well, it's just a record of things that happened in the past. But it's really a story of everyday people and the things that they did. It's really a reality show. When we're talking about history, we're not just talking about political history, which is leadership and government, wars and major events, but we're talking about the things that people did every day of their lives as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important that children understand that they become characters in history the day they're born. And even though they might not have deep knowledge of what happened in the past, every day they live, they're creating their own history.
That's a fantastic point. That's a fantastic point. Because that will. I'm looking at the clock because this is opening a wonderful another discussion when I have you back, and we'll focus in on how to present history. And I think Barbara, we have to make a date for us and for each one of you on the panel here for a one-on-one hour. What you just said, I think, is tremendously important because there are interesting enough people who are not interested in history because they say, you know, it doesn't connect to me. But history is more than even also movements. It's individual stories of regular people. Um, Nadine, we spoke about you presenting your stories that are touching on real and sometimes difficult subject matters. I want to throw it quickly to uh, Carol, if you do readings, because I know you have so many different jobs. Carol is like, I don't know how she puts all this stuff into a 24-hour day, but I want to know from you how you deal with readings, if you do bookings with readings. I mean, obviously not now during COVID, but how do you go into these schools and connect with people? Do you have any um, tips how to do that and how to avoid pitfalls in that environment? And then I just want to tease this out. I just noticed a special guest in the audience uh, that I spoke to earlier, and we'll bring her in. But Carol, first, how do you get exposure, readings? Do you do the school circuit still?
Yeah, of course I do. Brittany, who's my avatar handler, my wrangler, my avatar wrangler, she's my assistant, and usually we do a mailing in the summer. Like, for instance, we're going to get one ready to go out for the fall, and we contact PTA, which is Parent Teacher Associations in the States. I have no idea what they'd be outside of the States. We send a brochure. There's also a website where you can be registered. I think it's under BOCES in New York, where you could be registered, and then they come and people from there, they invite them to the school. So the first thing, when I send out a brochure, I send out usually a sample book. I send a list of my books, and like we mentioned before, reading. There are some schools, I went to a few religious schools that had expressly asked me. I do ask them that when they ask me to come, are there any of my books you don't want me to discuss? For instance, the yoga book, in some of the religious schools that I've gone, they've asked me not to mention the yoga book.
The yoga book, why not?
Because they felt, I don't think, this is not my point of view, but they felt it was a religion. And they didn't. Yeah, they felt that it was Eastern religion, and they specifically did not want me mentioning it, and that's happened to me quite a bit. For instance, in my joke book, the one that you liked, there's one joke about a husband and a man turned to his husband. We tried for inclusiveness when we were writing this joke book, the publisher and I. And because of this, there are a lot of people that have banned the book. And there's one joke in 800 that does that. And people are uncomfortable with it. And the top two or three reviews are 2 and 1 stars because of this one joke. Reached one on Amazon, so I think the majority of people are not offended. But yeah, I do ask, is there any you do not want me to discuss? And I adhere to their guidelines. You have to, if you're being invited to somebody's house, you have to ask them, how they want to be comfortable. And I get a fee. I come to the school, and then we decide if it's going to be intimate. We just did one right before COVID that was in a library. I had four sessions, and it's interactive. We do the culture books. I use the joke book to break the ice. I have about 6 different series, and I read a portion of the books depending on the kids' age groups. I've even done a presentation on how to write a book, which kids. It was so interactive and fascinating. So many of the kids are interested in writing their own books, and they wanted to know what the process was. So you could talk about anything. the thing is to talk it over with your parent, teacher, advocate, or whatever.
Talk it over with the yoga people, as long as you don't mention yoga. Elfbite in the chat says certain Christians connect yoga to pagan religion of Hinduism. Margi, really quickly on the circuit, and then I want to go to our special guest. Oh my God, the clock is ticking. This is insane. Margi, when you go to schools, do you have any special requests, not to mention the Nazis or anything like that?
No, I haven't experienced that, but I've had friends who have been censored by schools. I have one friend who has a young adult book about, it's not about a prostitute, but there's a prostitute in it. And she was disinvited to a school. And I know a lot of authors have had experiences who write about LGBTQ issues with schools. I haven't. I do quite a lot of school visits and Skype and young authors conferences and writing workshops and so on. And generally, I find the librarians and the teachers very open-minded and welcoming. And I love talking with the students and just finding out what they're thinking about and what they're wanting to talk about. And of course, a lot of them are very interested in writing, so that's also a lot of fun.
Just bringing up here a random slide. Oscar Rozovsky is from Your Village of Scoundrels as one of the characters, and this is some of the historical photos you put into your books, which are so well made. I don't have it in my advanced reader's copy, but these are Hanne and Max. I think they're two Jews that were rescued by the French during the Nazi occupation of France, and this makes your books, generally speaking, the young adult books, so fascinating. In the back there are 10-15 pages of historical material. In the interest of time, I want to bring on a special guest that is unannounced, and she's sitting in the audience right now. Her name is L.L. McKinney, and L.L. McKinney is a author of young adult fantasy. And L.L., if you can hear us, please, can you hop on stage? Because when I booked this panel, we did not have any writer of color on this panel, and now we have one in the audience, and we need to get him on. I hope LL has voice on. Uh-oh. Does she have voice? Here she's coming. LL, you can sit on this stack of books. I brought you this stack of books. Can you see this here in front of the stage? If you sit on it right here, bring it a little closer. And so L. McKinney is not only an author of wonderful fantasy young adult, she also started sort of a firestorm. And this is something that I wanted to talk about anyway, which is compensation and the fee structure. And actually, more specifically, I wanted to know if all you guys are extremely rich from writing and illustrating books. But LL McKinney has started a hashtag on Twitter. The hashtag is #PublishingPaidMe, #PublishingPaidMe. And it was a call to action for folks to reveal their advances and the money that they get from publishers, and specifically to reveal the pay gap between white and writers of color. So, Elle, welcome to the Second Life Book Club, and thank you for joining us this last minute. Please give us some context on the publishing paid me. How much will I get as a white guy? That's all I care about.
Thank you for having me. A lot goes into the factors for what an author gets paid. Most of it has to do with how widely the publisher thinks the story will appeal to people. this idea of the universal story. If the story is more universal, then it's gonna, appeal to more people and they'll want to write it. Well, there's this issue of which stories people think are universal, and they're very much not Black stories or stories by other authors of color, because we are squirreled away into specific categories. We're not just out there in fiction. It has to be Black fiction.
And those categories are also limited, I guess, in the sort of their when they put their budget together or whatever. They have X amount of books with that topic, right? And so there's
Yes.
also a limit of how many spots are even open to writers of color, I guess.
Well, yes. While on submission, I wasn't the only one, but other authors of color would hear, "Thank you, the book is great, but we have our one Black girl book for the year," because we're only allowed one from whatever publisher. We only get one. It doesn't matter the genre. It doesn't matter the age category. Just the one. No one's saying that about white stories, though. And
Now,
then,
I'm sorry to interrupt real quick. I want to
no, fine.
jump in real quick on the back panel here. People can see this is a tweet from Wai Ting. She's an author in Singapore, and she says, "Unknown white man, $800,000. Unknown white woman, $400,000. If person of color, take away 1 0. If Black, take away 2 zeros." And so that is how she sort of summarizes the reality as she sees it in one tweet. What does she refer to with the unknown white man, $800,000?
Well, over the last...
That's what, since I'm a white, Elle, that's, like I said, I'm a white man. I need to get my hands on that 800.
Right? Just get you that money, get that bag. What it's referring to is people are starting to reveal, what it was that they were given. And there are people of, for instance, there was one Black author who is friends with a white author, and he got $300,000 for writing a book about Black people. And she got, I think it was $45,000, which a lot of people are like, "Oh, that's still a lot of money." Well, it also depends on where you live. If you live in New York, after taxes and after an agent, that's less than 20 grand to live in New York. So, no.
Well, and I think we have to put in the context. I know that there's a lot of writers here watching this and in the audience too, but if you're not one, also keep in mind when sometimes these big sums are thrown around, and I say this often, I was, and I still am in the music business, not touring anymore, but I produce and I write, and sometimes the figures that are thrown around, they can be, they may seem very large for people who do sort of a 9-to-5 job or something that is very regular. But the thing is, you don't get these jobs all the time. And I guess with writers, you have to, this has to last you for quite a bit of time, this money.
Oh, yeah. Depending on how it's calculated and how the books are linked together, if somebody buys a series of 3 books for $10,000 each, that's $30,000, right? You get paid half of that on signing. So you get paid $15,000 up front. 30% you need to put away for Uncle Sam. 15% you need to put away for your agent. So right then, you're already cut down to maybe $7 grand for you to go in your pocket right then. And then you don't get paid until you turn the book in. So you turn the book in a year later because it takes you a year to write it. So then you get another $7,000. But no, not actually 7. You get $2,000 because that 7 is now split between 3 books. So this idea that, oh, you got $45,000, that's not enough to last you half the year. If that. I don't have bills that I can spend $20,000 on a whole year and be okay.
Did you get backlash? And I don't know, I want to make sure if I give you the right credit. I believe there was another gentleman involved in pushing this hashtag, and the name escapes me now. But did you?
Tochi, yes.
and let's put his name maybe in local chat, and then we can also in the show notes we can put it all together. But did you get backlash from people where they said, you guys are idiots that you reveal this stuff?
I haven't gotten any specific backlash yet, which is
By
new.
idiots, I mean sort of self-defeating. I can see somebody making an argument that this is bad for specific people trying to negotiate a good deal with publishers.
Oh yeah, well there are detractors, of course, but there's nobody being hateful about it that I have seen, which is new because whenever other conversations have come up about this, people will say, "Well, why are you trying to make it about race?" And I don't think anyone really understands that the last thing that Black authors want this to be about is race. But we didn't make it this way. We didn't decide who the universal story is for. We didn't decide that we were going to get paid less. We had nothing to do with this. This is how it was created. Like publishing started back when it was illegal for us to read and write. We didn't make that decision. But we would like for it to be rectified. I would love for it to be a meritocracy where it doesn't matter what you look like or anything like that. The story just has to be good. But that's not the world that we live in. And
The
you can't
best
fix a
content
problem if you don't admit there's a problem.
Right. The best content will float up top. I hate that phrase.
Yeah.
Nadine, I want to have your opinion real quick, and then the white folks on the panel too. We're going a little bit over time, but it's okay with our wonderful cinematographer Strawberry. She's fine with it. Thank you. Nadine, do you have this experience where people in the projects where you illustrate another author's book or with your own books, that a publisher will say, this specific slot of this specific category is now closed because we have only, I don't know, one or two books for this category or from this sort of cultural background. In your case, I know that your publisher Lantana, is it right? I have to make sure that Lantana Publishing. I mean, they specialize on children's books from diverse backgrounds and diverse cultures. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so happy that you brought McKinney, Ellen McKinney to the panel because it's part of my pain. So there's something called BAME authors, so BAME authors. So these are Black, ethnic minorities, or Asian authors. And I don't know if anybody knows that. So let's talk about the UK.
Yes, BAME is in the UK. Yeah, let's clarify. So this would be the analogy: people of color, POC in the US, and then BAME is the UK equivalent of it. Yeah,
it's basically Black and ethnic minority. So I am part of this category because I come from an ethnic minority, and only 3% of books published here written by authors of color and ethnic minorities in a country that is so diverse. Can you believe how frustrating that is? And to answer your question, yes, I've been through this difficulties a lot. A lot of the time they would tell me that your story is too niche and it's not universal enough, and therefore they would rather have their classic white, middle-class, male, British author who's writing the story. So it is a fight that we have to go through, and it is a struggle, and we are fighting an entire very rigid industry to include characters of colors, diverse culture, ethnic minorities, Asian characters, for all the children to see the world around them really, and not to be in a small window to see one character and one culture dominating culture only.
This is really ludicrous. This is getting me angry when I'm listening to you guys. So you don't even. I mean, you have to. That also pits writers of color, BAME, people who are in this group against each other, because you're competing for the same one slot that is available.
Well, in my experience, we do support each other. We are a very small minority here in the UK, and we try to support each other, to try to give each other as much opportunities as possible. But yes, it's only 3%. So can you believe how much competition for us, where the rest of us, of the
Yeah.
authors, are just having a bit of an easier time in children's publishing. So what I love, though, that a lot of local people, a lot of white writers are part of the fight. So that's why we need to be all in this together for all of our children, regardless what your ethnic background is, because it's a child who reads about the entire world is a much more knowledgeable child and has a much more rich personalities and more empathetic child, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I mean that this has to be even, said is said. Is the Black Lives Matter movement now, or the iteration that we have now with Black Lives Matter, where it's such a different vibe, where a lot of white people are joining in, and how is that helping this cause for Black writers?
I think it's bittersweet because yes, it's great to have the support now, but a lot of us are like, where was the support before we were dead and dying in the street? Why does it take that to get you motivated to listen to us about this? So I'm never going to look, support in the mouth. Look a gift horse in the mouth. I won't necessarily be overjoyed that you're here because it took you this long to get here. I'm not going to kick you out, but don't expect an award for showing up to the party late. That's usually how I view it. Is great, you're here. You don't get a cookie for it. We got work to do. Let's go. Like that's where it is. It's like, if you're here, get in line. We got to keep moving. It's not over because you showed up. We don't have time to teach you everything. You're gonna have to. It's a crash course. You're gonna have to learn baptism by fire, like on the move. Let's go. So it's really great to see this worldwide thing, and because it is important for, like she was saying, we want these stories for us because we want the representation, but it matters for white kids to read these stories too. It helps them too. It's for everyone. It helps everyone to see everyone as who they are fully.
Thank you so much, Elle. And I have to say goodbye to our streaming audience because we are wrapping the stream, but we'll stick around for another 20-25 minutes for the in-world audience only, for our exclusive in-world people who have waited here patiently and came in. I think we're full. We're fully booked. Maybe there's 2-3 seats left where people can jump in. Thank you, Barbara Mojica, aka Little Miss History, Nadine Kaadan, Margi Preus, Carol P. Roman, and Elle McKinney. This was a fabulous discussion. I will put out a reading list on bookshop.org. The links are in the description in the video. Next week, surprise, Elle McKinney will be here for the onward. We'll expand the discussion. Everybody is welcome, even all the authors. You're welcome to come here and join in as an audience member. So next week we'll talk specifically about the challenge of writers of color in the publishing industry, which I know absolutely nothing about, which is absolutely fascinating for me as a reader to get a bigger insight. Thanks to my team, Strawberry Bread, Patch, Marianne, Kralos, and Silas, also here in the audience. See you guys all next Wednesday at 12 o'clock, Second Life time, here at the Second Life Book Club.